So Yugesh, just wanted to inform, I'll just unshare now and
If we
I will
start, I
just
think we
reshare
should
it back.
start this session.
Sure.
Before we start, like I'm really excited about the session, and please share some emojis, shout out, comments, whatever you can with the stuff. Ready with your stuff and meeting take note like keynotes, and it will be nice if you can share those notes on LinkedIn, Twitter, or any of the social media platforms, tagging NASSCOM product skills. Being of my side, like I am Rahul Mangla, product professionals from NASSCOM ProductSkills team. Welcome all to yet another interesting session from NASSCOM ProductSkills, managing priorities while building product roadmap. NPS has a vision making India a product superpower by building and nurturing 50,000 product professionals by 2025 and creating the world's largest product community. To achieve that, we have crafted programs like master classes, mentorships, conduct webinars, panel discussions, and community engagement activities, where you get to hear from and interact with best-in-class product professionals. Now, I welcome the our moderator and get you over his brief. Praneeth is a solution-driven product manager with overall 15 years in IT industry, successfully creating and delivering enterprise-grade products and services in the cloud in the area of cloud, networking, and telecom softwares. Praneeth has also worked with HPE, Cisco, NES, and Actesense Technologies in product architect development and automation. Now I'm handovering the session to Praneeth. Thank you, Praneeth, for this thing, and you can carry forward.
Thank you, Rahul. Excited to see all of you here. So, and a warm welcome to all of our listeners for taking the time. Good evening to all of you. Hope all of you had a good early weekend lunch, and we're still geared up for the today's session, managing competing priorities while building a product roadmap. So I am Praneeth Nerametla from the NASSCOM Product Skills team and an aspiring entrepreneur for or in the field of AI products. So I'll be taking you through the session and with the help of our esteemed guests, Yugesh and Vishal. Welcome, Yugesh and Vishal. So Yugesh Deshpande is a brief intro about both of them, Yugesh and Vishal. So Yugesh is a self-motivated senior leader with an in-depth technical understanding in the complex world of data analytics, info management with more than 21 years in the areas of consulting, business development, outsourcing, and large program delivery management engagements. So he comes with a rich global experience across multiple countries like US, UK, Hungary, India. And he's a proud recipient of the Best People Manager Award from Mr. Razim Premji. Yugesh is currently serving as the board member and MD of Next Pathway and is responsible for the company's India operations, business strategies, plans, and focus on cloud migration and IT delivery with impacts of enhancing capabilities of Next Pathways technologies and products to improve predictability on deliveries, and he has achieved them. Awesome. So I think prior to Next Pathway, Yugesh was a senior director with LTI in oil and gas manufacturing verticals and was responsible for global delivery, pre-sales in areas of edge, cloud, big data, analytics, BFSI, retail, MFG, healthcare, and life sciences. So prior to LTI, Yugesh has spent close to 10 years with Wipro and also brief stints with TCS and Cognizant as well. So Yogesh has a master's management studies degree from the Mumbai University, Maharashtra, and BE in the electrical engineering from Amravati University, Maharashtra. So next we have Vishal. So Vishal is our second esteemed guest with an overall experience of 16 plus years in the industry. He has been working with First Hive Solutions in a product as a product manager or the head of products, and he was also into quite a bit of product development. And I welcome again both of you, giving a warm welcome to have this exciting discussion with all of us. Thank you, guys. So before we proceed any further, I would like a poll to be conducted. Prashant, would it be possible to get an audience poll? Yeah. So people, please select the choice based on your experience in the industry, or if you're an aspiring product manager or an entrepreneur or an early professional, mid-career, or an experienced professional. Okay, cool. So I think we have quite a few results. So we have around 21% early professionals, 19% mid-career, 32% experienced, and 11% those who are interested in PM roles, and the rest 8 plus 8% with students and PM turned entrepreneurs. So with this, I think thank you for the poll. Let's quickly go to the next topic. The topic we are having today, as you all know, is managing competing priorities while building product roadmap. And I hand it over to Yogesh to go with the initial presentation and take the ball from here, right?
Thanks, Praneeth, for that warm welcome. If you could share the deck, yeah. Perfect. Yep. Thank you, Praneeth. Warm welcome to everyone. Very good evening, Vishal, and all of you who are tuned in. As Praneeth and team explained, we are touching very important topic today, which is essentially a conflicting priorities while building a product roadmap. And I'm sure all of us are making priority calls in some form and shape in our day-to-day life. So before we touch upon these priorities and why there is a conflict in the first place, and why they are conflicting in nature, let's spend some time on the bringing product roadmap to life, right? You may all be familiar with the term. You would have heard it already, experience it in some form and shape in creating product roadmaps, right? In my opinion, building a product itself is both art and science, right? It basically separates successful products and the teams that launch them from those that are unsuccessful and is well thought out, and the whole premise is essentially in terms of well thought out product roadmap. We are essentially moving towards the product led era now. In my opinion, product roadmap hence you are seeing this crystal glass essentially is the same instrument, right? Through this, we want to solve all our challenges as well. Did you get this feeling as well when you started? Maybe some, you want to ponder over in terms of a crystal glass analogy here. If we can move to the next slide, Praneeth. If I look at Gartner's survey, right, almost about 32% of the respondents identified a need to deliver more quickly as their main driver of adoption of product-centric adoption, right? When I say it's a product, we are moving towards product-led era. Essentially, it means we are moving towards product-centric economy. And one of the fundamental reason for that is the speed to the market, right? Which is the main driver for this whole transformation process. And to that effect, product roadmap then become the single most important and critical element or the document that you will ever produce, right? Now, this particular roadmap or a product roadmap is essentially the heart and soul of the company's strategy. I've gone through a report some time back with Nielsen, which states that out of the 3,000 products, 3,000 new products that are launched every year, roughly only 15% of them are truly successful. Now, this doesn't come as much of a surprise, because if you consider the demand on the priority from users, from investors, from the team, delivery team, from R&D team, the market, etc. So all these forces put a lot of demand on the conflicting nature of this, and hence sometimes the product does not really come and see light of the day, right? Essentially, with this whole advent of the modern world of technology, with new product ideas coming every now and then, right? And then the prioritization itself becomes the tug of a war. Now, even if we win that war, overall product does not. Let me also tell you that product roadmap is not a project management tool. There is a reason why the product roadmap name has a map in it, right? You would actually use this map to navigate your way into your destination and not put milestones and in terms of dates, etc. Of course, you will have some kind of approach there as a roadmap, and we will see briefly as to what it basically constitutes. Product roadmap also provides us the information regarding the direction of overall business strategy. It basically connects the objectives with business objectives and the product demand that it needs to serve. I would say, just like going back to crystal glass analogy, it is basically a glimpse into your future corporate strategy. After all, you need to build and develop your product that meets a specific target consumer, and we will see why target consumer customers are so important in building the product roadmap and also looking at the steps that we need to take. So overall, product roadmap is a summary document that guides the product management team in terms of what is coming next, what types of new ideas, features that are basically incorporated, what needs to be prioritized in order to maximize the value that the target group essentially is trying to understand or derive from the product. Additionally, the document also basically needs to be used to provide useful insight to all the external as well as internal stakeholder in your organization. So we'll talk about what are the key elements of the plan, but whole communication collaboration strategy itself is very, very important. Now, why don't we look at the origin of this conflict in the product management in the first place? If you can move on to the next slide, please. This is a McKinsey report, basically where companies are setting the direction for from R&D product R&D's perspective, and they need to answer a couple of key important question in terms of the overall plan. So if I look at what we need to essentially deliver is in terms of understanding what we need to deliver on the battle cards and corporate strategy, right? So understand what the company wants and can deliver. The R&D, the commercial and the corporate strategy functions need to collaborate closely with commercial and corporate strategy teams anchoring this overall R&D, right? So R&D becomes very, very important strategy essentially, and R&D and the corporate strategy needs to sync up with each other. What we need to deliver is another important aspect that we need to look at, right? This particular R&D then determines the capabilities and technologies, and most likely this will go hand in hand. So when you are looking for trying to deliver a particular roadmap, you need to understand these both concepts very well. And finally, in terms of how do we deliver it? So McKinsey says the choices of operating model then comes into play in these particular aspects, right? So that's where I thought it is very important for us to understand what steps that we need to take. If you can move on to the next slide. Then it comes the point in terms of what is the key elements of overall the roadmap, right? And it of course starts at the top in terms of having the right product vision and the strategy. Now, product vision is essentially what is expected, and explain as is basically in explaining the art of possibilities that can help making a great product. But this initial vision need not have to be the final one, but at least it gives you a starting the process to build the consensus within the terms of product roadmap, so that further planning can continue and you can help craft the strategy around it. The overall plan and strategy also look at what kind of market opportunity that we are targeting, right? For example, if you look at, everybody is now looking at cloud migration, right? Everybody is adopting cloud and digital technologies, and cloud migration itself has become a $1 billion opportunity. Most of the hyperscalers and system integrators essentially have solved for the data migration problems. But what about the code that is lying out there since donkey ages, right? This ecosystem where nobody understands what is happening in the current ecosystem. There is no, most likely there is no residual knowledge of the code. And that's the precise problem that we at Next Pathway recognized long back. And through our vision and strategy, we were able to be ahead of the curve, where we tapped this market and essentially providing the automated cloud migration products for our customers. It is very important for us to understand and look at the overall market dynamics that we are operating in. It also then ponders us to think in terms of what is our market opportunity. So one of the key elements is also understanding what we are essentially targeting, right? And then look at the focused market, and the willingness of customer is the key success. And I'll talk about a little bit in terms of how do we align the whole customer alignment here, right? Because when you're looking at successful product roadmap, trying to look at the priorities and adjust around it, and we'll see what are the methods shortly around that as well. Customer alignment is the key component of your overall product roadmap. You need possibly 1 or 2 anchor customer to co-innovate you, deliver with you, and maybe possibly fail with you, so that you can learn. Now, this roadmap should also then take, look at more of a hypercare aspects when you are working with anchor customers, because they are investing their time, money, and resources as well for this product to be successful. We at Next Pathway essentially make sure that we insulate our core engineering and R&D team from implementation, right? So that overall, when you are aligning with the customer and delivery, or overall product roadmap is not suffered. And I think that is one of the key is how do you insulate your core R&D and engineering team before you venture into next set of points, right? Before I talk about market research and other things, I thought communication and collaboration is the fundamental aspect of overall product roadmap. Now, it may sound cliche, but every product manager knows that building a product roadmap comes with its challenges and can prompt a lot of questions. And the whole topic today is about those questions. A lot of people asking questions and deciding the priorities on our behalf, right? And that essentially, those questions, of course, needs answering. And those discussions have to take place across the organization. And hence, because communication essentially is very, very key about all the in terms of the product roadmap. We need to also look at what kind of change we are seeing ourselves, right? How are we operating today? Is our McKinsey report we have seen is our operating models needs changing? How do we create offerings that we can overall in a data world? If I look at how do I organize my data properly, prepare and then able to take to the consumers, and that's where some of these communication strategies is very important, because if some of the pitfalls typically that happens, if you're not able to communicate, then it may leave your delivery teams, your team members, even your stakeholders, including customers, they may be behind understanding your roadmaps, or they may feel undermotivated. And so it is important to create a goal-based strategy, which basically have a lot of room for innovation, and you are able to understand the market forces through your market research, sales, and marketing, and other aspects. And essentially, that's how we also at Next Pathway focused on customer centricity to ensure that our customers are successful through our products, right? I'm sure some of you are B2B product managers. They will particularly be familiar in terms of what I was talking about, these various challenges, right? It's essentially from internal and external customers and environment. They're far more complex and require product manager to make product truly exceptional while maintaining a essential balance between vision and customer requirements, right? In summary, what exactly now we are seeing, more productized approach is we are also creating a lot of MPVs, which is minimum viable product. I think this is a successful marriage between the market, right? Essentially the consumers, your users, and overall stakeholders, with your business and technology that you are going to build. And MPV is a compromise for sure, right? And that's where, coming back to our topic of discussion of the priorities, and we will see it shortly, it is a compromise, but essentially it will always have an element of risk built into it. But the trick here is to choose which areas are worth taking the risk on, and which need rigor and solid validation prior to introduction to the market and adoption of this product. So that's all what I had to say. I'll hand over to Vishal for taking us through how do we solve this puzzle of having these various forces that are making us take the decisions from one side to other side, these priorities, what kind of steps that we need to take, what are the various methods that we will take. So over to you, Vishal. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Yogesh. Praneeth, if you could just move to the next slide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Yogesh. So before we move to the next slide, Vishal, would you prefer to have a poll?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Prashant, can we please have the poll? So in the meanwhile, audience, if you have any queries, feel free to shoot it out. We're all ears and excited to look into them. Thank you. Okay. So the poll today is we are trying to look at what prioritization techniques are currently being used, and where is the focus is what we're trying to understand. So we have a couple of options: Agile's InvestSmart, NASSCOM models, or we have single customer-focused or driven models, or prioritization models, and market-focused models. So thank you. I think the poll is done. I see 52% based mostly on customer-focused or customer-driven models, prioritization. 38% on Agile models, InvestSmart, NASSCOM, market-focused 8%, multiple subscribers or customers, and rest is 3%. So over to you, Vishal, for giving us more insights onto the techniques and different models, and how do we handle prioritization? Thank you.
Thanks, Praneeth. If you could just move to the couple of slides ahead, please. Okay, that's the one. Right. So, folks, so far we've heard about why do we need to look at prioritization itself in the first place. And Yogesh has also covered what are the key things that you need to look out for while building your product roadmap. Now, over the next 10-15 odd minutes, I will aim to cover two key topics, which is to start off with what are the different techniques for prioritizing your roadmap. And obviously, as you kind of see in the list, by no means is this intended to be an exhaustive list looking at the kind of time we have here today. And I will also try to draw out a framework in terms of how to choose a prioritization model that best fits your business requirements. right? So with that, let me kind of jump in into the meat here, which is to start off, right? A lot of which model you select will depend on multiple factors, which we'll cover in the next slide. But at its core, there are different types of models that you can essentially start with. The simplest of them are essentially what we term as focus models. Now, when we talk about focus models, this is about understanding that, hey, as a product, as an organization, what is the key focus that you want to drive in this period? The period here, again, would be defined by what kind of a Scrum cycle or a sprint cycle are you following? What kind of a release process do you normally follow? What are the kind of timelines from release to impact that you are able to measure? And from that perspective, you have two key models that you essentially look at. One, as you see, is the focus stream based, while the other is what we term as the focus flow based. The focus stream based is basically dependent on your company motion. When I say motion, as an org, as a product, you will have different streams of focus or different motions that are essentially driving your business, which could be in a particular quarter, you may want to see how do you potentially maximize your revenue? How do you potentially maximize your recurring licenses? How do you prioritize the user experience overall on the product and so on? And the intent here, these are all bucket-based models where you are trying to essentially take every feature, every request in your roadmap and bucket it into one of these focus streams. Now, of those streams that you will have a dedicated approach saying in this quarter, let's say, as an example, I will pick up only features that will directly have a measurable impact on the revenue. Or in the focus flow based, I will only pick up features which will have a direct impact on, let's say, my user onboarding flow, on my user activation flow, and so on. The key thing here, the advantage obviously as it's apparent, is that you are able to move the needle, and within a finite short amount of time, you are able to see a measurable impact, which obviously is something that every product manager is responsible for and is critical to the value that we drive. Moving ahead, you then get into a little more. The problem obviously in this is that you can't really do a prioritization within each bucket. And that is where you need to also look at other models within each bucket to see what essentially fits you. And we will speak a little more about that as we move ahead as well. The next prioritization framework or prioritization model that you typically would see, and I think this is the most common one I have seen across a multitude of organizations that I've worked with, is the impact effort or the value versus complexity model. Now, what you essentially have there is simply imagine a 2x2 matrix, where you essentially have 4 quadrants, because on one axis you have what is the complexity of the feature that you're trying to deliver, while on the other axis you have what is the kind of value that will be delivered by shipping this feature. So from that perspective, you now have 4 quadrants, starting off with high value, high complexity, high value, low complexity, that's low value, high complexity, and low value, high complexity. So that becomes the 2x2 matrix that you are now working with. Again, the intent is to figure out where does your, so you're only having 2 frameworks or 2 vectors on which you are trying to essentially rank each feature, each functionality that you're picking up as part of your roadmap. And the obvious piece here is that the low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better word, would be you want to pick up things which are your high value but low complexity. So easier to ship, easier to deliver value on, but not as much as difficult to actually deliver on the ground. Now, once you get there, that is when you start moving on to the other quadrants. And what this obviously does is it provides a little method to the madness in terms of how are you trying to figure out which feature to pick up and which to push back. Plus, it also gives you a framework to be able to push back to multiple cross-functional stakeholders in terms of why you are or are not picking up a particular feature as part of your Scrum, as part of your roadmap in a given period. So moving on now, the next model that we're talking about here is the RICE method. So there's obviously a leading communication product company called Intercom, which had pioneered this mechanism. And again here, the mechanism on paper is fairly simple, which is to say it is your reach, that's the R, the I is the impact, the C is the confidence score, E is the effort. The formula to calculate this is very simple, which is for every feature that you have in your list, you now have these 4 vectors on the basis of which you want to start ranking them. You start off with the reach, where reach is the number of users or number of customers that you will end up impacting in that given period. Then you have the impact, and the impact itself is something that is on a comparative scale. Hey, so we are on the, I just see a message here that screen shows it on the same slide. We are on the slide of techniques for prioritizing product roadmap. Do let us know in case that's not the screen that you're seeing there. Right. So in terms of the impact, this is again a comparative scale from 0.25, which is a low impact or a negligible impact, to a 3 being the highest. Confidence score is again a subjective measure, which is how confident are you of delivering that feature in that given period. You can start as low as 20%, which is you have no confidence of being able to deliver, while at the far end you have 100% confidence of being able to hit the impact and reach objectives. You then have the effort, which is defined here in person months. But typically what you do is, now they've done this in person months because that's how they kind of plan out their scrums, but you can tie this into your scrum cycles as well as a modification. And as you kind of see ahead, you will have to tweak any of these models that you actually pick up to make it suit your requirements. And we'll speak about that as well. What you'll end up with as a result of this RICE method is it's a reach into impact into confidence score divided by effort. So you get again a scoring done across our entire feature set, and that helps you prioritize. It basically gives you a simple, logical, objective mechanism of being able to pick or basically deprioritize a particular feature or functionality in your Scrum. The next model that we are talking about here is what is termed as the ICE method, which is a simpler, modified version of the RICE method itself, as you can tell. So all you do here is, especially in scenarios where, let's say, you are early on in your product journey and you may not necessarily have enough data points to talk about your customer reach, or let's say you are building out a new MVP where you are not able to stick your neck out to say, this is the exact number of users that I will be impacting with this feature. You take the reach out and you also play around with the scale. So this could be a very simple 1 to 10 subjective scoring on impact, confidence score, and effort. Same formula applies, impact into confidence divided by the effort. And what you are left with is a comparative ranking or scoring of all your feature sets, which can be used for prioritizing. Another name for this method also is the feasibility, desirability, and viability scorecard, as you could imagine. So I'm going to skip that in the interest of time here. Then you have perhaps what is the most widely used mechanism or most widely used framework by all the business analysts and product managers out there. Something I believe also gets picked up in a bunch of the new age product management or business analysis courses as well, which is the Moscow analysis. Not an, as I was reminded yesterday, not an ideal term to use in these times of Moscow, but it's a very simple framework that basically helps you classify every feature that you have in one of 4 parameters, which is to say this is a feature that's a must-have. That's the M part of the Moscow. It's a should-have. That's the S part. It's a could-have. That's the C part. And it's a won't or a will not have. So all you are doing is you are classifying every feature on one of these 4 parameters, saying this is a feature that I must have. This is an absolute hygiene. So let's take a very simple example of this, right? Let's say you are a restaurant and you are trying to design the optimal customer experience for the patrons who are coming in. Now, as part of this, what's a must-have feature for a customer is you being able to staff your dining room, staff your chefs, being able to deliver my food on time. That's a must-have requirement. A should-have is, okay, you know what? I am not really, depending on the climate in Bangalore, I'm not really pertinent about. Yeah, I think that's a very good point that Samit has made right now, that the drawback of Moscow obviously is that the effort does not get taken in. And that is what we also see in terms of the next slide, which is how do you kind of choose the right framework for yourself. But the thing here is you will have features there that you could say, you know what, I think there are other restaurants in the area who are, let's say, offering an absolutely wide glove service with, it's an air-conditioned restaurant. I have my butler, kind of a waiter who's coming in to take my order and so on. So maybe that's something I could do, but not necessarily. But hey, an air condition for the kind of prices I want to deliver or what to charge are an absolute, I should be doing that because that's what the comparable is. While let's say I do not want the scenario like, let's say I have a particular cuisine in mind. There are certain cuisines or modifications that the patrons may request. I will not do that. But again, depending on your business strategy, you may choose to put it in a could have, should have bucket as well. So which is the key thing, that every framework that you are selecting has to be personalized or configured depending on what are your business objectives that you are trying to drive. And that's going to be key there. Then you have perhaps the most, at least in my opinion, the most complex model of the lot, which is the Kano method. Done by a famous researcher named Kano, Japan originated, where what you are essentially now trying to do here is have again a comparative scale, completely based on a customer feedback, where you are trying to divide depending on how frustrated or how delighted a customer would be if you deliver a particular feature, versus on a particular functionality, where does that functionality stand if, let's say, you do not have it versus you're able to provide the best in class. And that essentially gives you, again, multiple quadrants in terms of what kind of a delight will the customer potentially experience by utilizing this. This is a little complex model, definitely not recommended for folks who are starting off in their journey of setting up roadmap priorities. But for experienced practitioners, a variation of this absolutely does wonders, and we'll talk about that in the later part of the session as well today. The next one is a weighted scoring, and again here fairly widely used mechanism, where you are again trying to decide different vectors on which you want to score the features that you have and provide comparative scoring on each of these. What you again are ending up with is a weighted score of every feature with respect to a functionality. So you could have, let's say, an impact area like a customer engagement, an impact area like revenue, an impact area like sales enablement, an impact area like driving operational efficiency, where you are now, for each of these, how important are these to you in a given quarter? You are multiplying them by their relative scores that you will potentially have in terms of the effort or in terms of what will it take to get that going. And that is what again gives you a comparative ranking that you can utilize to help prioritize your roadmap. The next one is perhaps my favorite, which is feature buying, and something I often use to break a deadlock. Now, what again happens, right? Again, depending on the maturity of your organization, and in a lot of scenarios, you will not be the only decision maker in figuring out what flows into your roadmap. And so from that perspective, what can be done is, let's say you arrived at a shortlist of a particular set of features. And this obviously has the drawback, as you would realize when I'm speaking, is that this will not work if you have a large feature set. Is basis the effort that's going to go in, you put a price on every feature. So you have certain features which are scored 1, 2, 4, 10, 20, 100,000, whatever you have. It's a comparative scale again that you're kind of trying out there, obviously based on an objective scale that will need to get set up. Now, against that, for every individual who is an equal stakeholder in the decision, you need to give out a currency, which is how many points can they essentially spend. And that net currency needs to add up to the total number of person hours, person months, again, depending on how are you planning your scrums, of how can they buy a feature. Now, the interesting or the fun thing that normally happens in this, right, is you will have scenarios where you have certain individuals who feel very strongly about a particular feature, and they will literally bank all their money on one feature, saying, I don't care if you don't deliver anything else this quarter, just ship this feature for me, because this is what's relevant to my customer XYZ, or this is something that I believe is the next big thing that will help me move the needle on my quota. While you will have other who are now forced to take a judgment call saying, you know what, let me split this equally about the features that matter to me. So it kind of imposes a forced ranking between a single bucket. And obviously, the advantage is that you are able to get a buy-in of a significantly larger cross-functional team. The last one here is what gets called out as an opportunity scoring, where again, like the Kano model, this is also dependent on a lot of customer data, where you are trying to take a customer survey, having them rank or rate every feature on a comparative scale of 1 to 10. Now, as part of this, there are only two questions that you need to ask them, which is how important is this feature to you on a comparative scale of 1 to 10? And second is their satisfaction score, which is how satisfied are you with your current solution? There is a fixed formula here as well, which is in terms of your existing, your survey importance, right? Which is your importance plus the importance minus satisfaction is what gets called out as the opportunity score. And that is what you simply utilize to rank these. Again here, as I kind of called out earlier, by no means is this meant to be an exhaustive list, but just to act as a primer or a thought starter in terms of the different things out there. Obviously, feel free to Google, plenty of material available on all of this publicly online. Praneeth, if you can move to the next slide, please. Now, in terms of choosing the model that suits you, right, and I'm going to go a little fast here because I'm cognizant of the time that we have right now. It depends on multiple factors, which is how far along are you in your own product processes maturity. what kind of maturity do you have with respect to the audience or the internal customers or stakeholders that are working collaboratively with you to deliver this roadmap? What is the time frame? So, for example, given a sufficient enough time frame, everything moves to a must-have. But you compress the time frame, you are able to kind of move features out, and you are able to kind of focus in, which is obviously again becomes critical. Plus the stage of the customer life cycle, because there again, whether I am, let's say, early on in my customer journey, or I'm early on in I'm building out a new MVP, I'm delivering a new incremental functionality, all of those has a bearing on what kind of model should I ideally use. So, Praneeth, next slide, please. What we've tried to also do here is provide a quick cheat sheet or a quick reference, which is to say which model works best where and what the apparent cons are. So as you kind of see here, right, if you are just about starting out with your prioritization framework and trying to kind of utilize something that's out there, the focus models typically work well along with Moscow and the weighted scoring. While the feature buying model is something that really works well when you are trying to get a collaborative buy-in from multiple stakeholders that you want to kind of take along in the journey as you're moving ahead. RISE, Kano, and your opportunity scoring, a little more advanced models comparatively in the entire scheme of things, which you will have to customize or tweak a little bit, at least in terms of the scoring or what factors are you considering to make it relevant to your own business line. And again, a lot of this will depend on whether you're driving a B2B or a B2C business. What kind of data points of the customer do you have access to? Which customers can you actually do in-depth user interviews through? Or are you kind of doing your paid user interview based recordings? Are you able to get detailed in-depth? Are there regulatory constraints that you're looking at, and so on? So all of that obviously plays into what kind of a model that you will end up selecting. Praneeth, do you want to move to the case studies here itself, or?
Maybe we can take a minute or two is what I'm thinking at this point. Sure. And then, yeah, quickly dive into the queries. Yeah. Okay, so let's quickly dive into the queries. So we have quite a few queries from the audience. Caroline asks, what is the agile model? I know we have a software development cycle, but not with respect to prioritization. So I guess you have already briefly explained about the invest and the Moscow models. Could you just elaborate it a bit so that we can dwell into that a bit?
Absolutely. So, Caroline, you're correct that Agile typically gets used in the context of your Agile software development. And that's essentially how you kind of split that into sprints, how do you kind of ship your product out. But the context in which we use that is against the sprint that's being picked up. What are the models that will essentially enable a simpler prioritization within multiple cross-functional priorities that you may essentially be facing? So that's what we basically try to clarify kind of there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so, Vishal. Thank you. So we have a few more queries. Let's attend to them as well. And so one of the queries is, how would one prioritize features from, say, a single customer amongst a bunch of prospects and available customers, and between a VC or a stakeholder, assuming both have similar value, complexities, timelines, but there is no intersection or reusability of the features amongst themselves. So, Yogesh, would you like to take this?
Yeah, thanks, Praneeth. And that's a great question. And essentially, that's where the conflicting nature starts, right? As I was explaining earlier, there are these competing forces in terms of asking the questions. And essentially, if your favorite customer coming and asking you a feature, that's where the real conflict starts. But essentially, if you look at when you link it with the product vision and the strategy and the initial customer, you need to have anchor customers for sure, right? For your product to be successful, product to be you would need customer references at a later point in time. So I wouldn't say it's a one customer versus another. It's basically if you are able to drive deeper with the customer in terms of understanding that nature and it that requirement, and it is aligning with your roadmap, I think you would go ahead with following with that particular customer. But saying no is also important from a communication standpoint, no matter how critical that customer is for you from that particular product perspective. If that product feature is not part of your roadmap that customer is seeking, or you do not see any strategy with respect to the market that you want to operate in, right, then you may want to look at a separate way of engaging with that customer in terms of as a part of the maybe delivery. You could card out a separate customization for that particular customer and help that customer as well. But don't tamper the product roadmap that you already have, the feature set that you already established, because one customer is trying to force. And same thing goes with the investors as well as the question pointed out, right? Each one will have their own expectation from what this product can do. But as a product owner, product manager, you would have the complete ownership of defining the strategy and making sure that runs as per the need, right? And the onus is also then making sure that right communication, collaboration is sought with respect to all the stakeholders. So I would say stick to the plan. What you agreed. Plans are flexible as long as you are able to drive within the product roadmap that you are seeking for, and then approach your customer or your stakeholders accordingly.
Yep. Thank you, Yogesh. So we have another query from Samit and Muthukumar, similar queries. Both are having an early traction stage of their product release, and they have beta customers and an initial acceptance in the stages across the stages of MVP and PMF. So they're asking what kind of model would be better suited for prioritization, especially when they have a huge volume of open items. So the query, I think, is based on what is the kind of methodology, which the model, what we can use to sort the huge number of open items, which will help them prioritize and release better, I guess. Vishal, would you want to give your
absolutely right?
Okay.
Absolutely. So, Muthu, Samit, to be very frank, I don't think I have a prescriptive answer for you, because to me, the correct answer is depends. What I mean by that is, as I kind of called out earlier in my talk as well, right? I don't think there's a single model that fits all kind of a prescriptive recommendation that anybody can provide here, because what we are practicing is not an exact science. Now, what I can tell you is, when we were at that stage, what really worked for us. So we are fairly ahead in our journey right now. We were perhaps at that stage about 5 years back as first type, where we were trying to find our initial traction. We had a bunch of customers, so we were in a fairly similar space, although we were going to enterprises and not SMBs. The thing there is, what we essentially did is we adapted a bunch of these models to make it our own. And that is the same building block, because that kind of served us well. We tried bringing in more amount of objectivity with every annual Scrum cycle that we will start planning, because obviously you don't want to have too many moving parts in the middle of the year as well. So what we essentially started with is a very simple weighted scoring based model, which is to say what matters to us, in the sense, what are the key things that what are the key vectors that will essentially drive our business. And so, for example, while we started off with something today, for example, when I look at my key vectors, it is my revenue that has an impact. My customer churn or customer retention is the key thing that I want to measure and drive as part of this roadmap. I want to talk about features that help me build a differentiation from a marketing or a PR perspective. Because it's a fairly complex product that we drive, I want to see how we can drive more operational efficiencies. While at the same time, there are also the effort angle that has to come in, because everything has an incoming cost. Now, that's what we started off. While there was a variation of this that we started off with, and it was a pure simplistic scoring that was done on a pure scale of 1 to 10 initially. What we've now reached from that perspective is to get a little more sophisticated there, or a little more advanced, and kind of speak about a more objective scale. So for example, in revenue, to me, a mid cycle, which is a 6 on a 10, is something that gives me revenue equivalent to one average customer value of mine. So that becomes one number that we kind of track. Anything that gives me a 2x of that becomes a 10. Anything that doesn't give me anything that gives me, let's say, an incremental module sell, since we are an enterprise product, that which typically is like 25% of my average annual customer value prices, that is what we typically rank as a 4. And anything below that is, it doesn't really play into the revenue scale. Similarly, on an effort basis, we've now split the effort. Earlier, when we started off, we had a simple scoring saying, hey, low effort, medium effort, high effort. Now we've kind of also dwelt into features that can actually help our growth teams move the needle faster. So we've gone into very low efforts, micro efforts on one side, and extremely high efforts on the other side, where we've now also linked the efforts on our Scrum cycles. So the point is, that is what has worked for us in terms of adapting a couple of these models to make it our own. And then obviously within each bucket, where at the end of it, you have a net number that kind of comes out for each of these feature sets. And just to kind of give you a reference, while the initial number of features that we were playing around was significantly larger, even today, we carry about 420 odd features in our long-term roadmap. So from that perspective, there is a second level of prioritization that gets done depending on the quarter focus streams that we spoke about. So whether I want to move the revenue this quarter, whether I want to improve a particular user flow this quarter, and so on. So a mix of that is definitely something that helps us. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal. I think basically what we're seeing is have multiple buckets, look at which bucket has to get the priority and focus on those priority. Let's say one bucket for existing customers, focus on that for this quarter or this PI. The next PI focus on the prospects or new additions, and then continue the cycle as needed.
Yeah, that's the second order thing, post doing the initial prioritization using one of the frameworks. Absolutely.
Thank you. So we have a few more queries I think we can take. So one of them is we have how do we measure or connect revenue against each open item in the product backlog by Muthukumar. So let me redo that again. How do we measure or connect revenue against each open item in the product backlog? I would add probably another part to it. Should we actually do it against open item? Yogesh, would you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. In my opinion, no, right? In terms of what we are essentially looking at, the product backlog is basically a feature set that we are looking at and building it, right? That itself does not translate into a sort of, you're not measuring the revenue with respect to what kind of features you are essentially looking at, right? Your overall product is what is driving your revenue. What you should try and measure essentially is that when your sort of a release plan is ready for that particular backlog items, are you able to sell those, right? Essentially, are you able to, and of course your backlog would entail only when you have certain addressable market, right? You're not building that product in some corner somewhere with far from market. As I said earlier, key is essentially to work with a customer who is co-innovating with us essentially, and able to give you that platform to in terms of enhance your backlog, and we have done that in the past multiple times as well, right? So from that perspective, I think if we decouple these two things, it will be important. You will have as a part of product roadmap, you will have revenue targets. You will plan for that. You will have cross sell upscale within the customer domain and the within the single customer, but backlog itself with respect to revenue, I think if we de-link, that will be good. Otherwise, the focus can shift from building a right product to again in terms of very differently. So R&D teams and product teams should focus primarily on that, and let other folks focus on the revenue aspect of it.
Yogesh, Praneeth, I'll take a slightly contrary view to that from my response, because at first time we have a revenue number pegged against every feature in our roadmap and our backlog. The reason we do that is, again, that as I kind of called out earlier, right, we take a weighted scoring. So revenue is one of the measures that goes into prioritizing a feature. It is absolutely fine. Not every item in the list will have a revenue impact, in which case that will get scored as 0. But as long as, let's say, it helps prevent customer churn, it helps move the customer user experience above, it kind of balances out. So again, it depends on what you're trying to drive.
Yes, I think it depends on the product, it depends on the market and the customer base.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Yogesh and Vishal. So, Prashant, I guess we have time for 2 more queries. Okay, so so we have a query which says, so do customer surveys work, or are any incentives required at times to identify opportunity scoring based prioritization? What other techniques can be employed other than surveys for matured products or features? Vishal, would you want to take a stab?
Absolutely. So, see, again, it depends on firstly whether you're running a B2C or a B2B product. Because for B2B products, absolutely, customer surveys work because your users are already incentivized. They've already made a bet on you. They've gone inside their company and said, hey, I'm buying this product. So they are invested. And from that perspective, they have a stake in your success. So they are more open to give you a frank feedback. On the B2C side, not as much. You may need to give out certain pieces as a value exchange. Now that could be different. It doesn't need to be actual cash. It can be in app currency. It could be something else. It could be a karma points or something there. But does it work? Absolutely. Because it is the simplest, cheapest, most effective mechanism of kind of going to a broad scale. What is ideal though, since I also heard mature product in the entire piece, is doing in-depth user interviews with a bunch of what you would have defined as your ideal customer profile. And I mean, I'm sure there'll be analytics on your end with your product teams to help you identify those. Reaching out to them offline, getting into more detailed sessions, in-depth, sit on the same table, have them open their machines, have them use your product, give you feedback, think aloud, plenty of tools on how to conduct a user interview out there. So, yeah.
Thank you, Vishal. So we have a query from Mehak Dengra. So Mehak is asking, for any B2B products, are there any tools or ways to collect feedback from competitors, customers, which might help prioritize things? Your take on it, Yogesh?
So in terms of, so I think if you look at B2B products, it's a huge marketplace we are talking about, right? So we are specifically on what products, etc., that we need to understand. But essentially, if I look at from our own perspective, from a say cloud migration products, etc., that we look at, customer feedback, you have Gartners of the world, and then you have Niel's, a lot of other agencies who typically help you understand this micro market dynamics, which you can definitely take help of. Other aspect is essentially is in terms of we talked about the surveys, right? Surveys is another great way of understanding not only the profile but also in terms of what our competition is doing, what kind of features, etc., that they have, which potentially we do not, or we have, but it is. So also I think that is one way of looking at things, is essentially in terms of and from a B2B product perspective, again, there is a huge marketplace. It also depends on what kind of products we are playing in which field, right? That's how I would approach in terms of the competitive analysis.
Sure. Thank you, Yogesh. I hope it's a good answer what you were looking for, Mehak. So yeah, I think we have a couple of queries regarding the communities. The community link is being shared by Prashant. Please access the link, join the community. You can contribute to NASSCOM in various ways as a way or means of building awareness or building up on the vocation itself. So apart from this, we have a couple of more minutes, I'd say. So I'll just take probably one more query at this point. So what is the prioritization strategy for long-term value associated products or features with low short-term returns and high complexity? Vishal, would you want to take a crack at this?
Hey, I'm sorry, Praneeth, your voice kind of broke there. If you could just.
So what is the prioritization strategy for long-term value associated products or features with low short-term returns and high complexity?
So I think that is something that will kind of fall into the impact versus the complexity model that we kind of spoke about, which is how do you kind of in a break out all features into a 2x2 quadrant, pick up what kind of works for you for the immediate piece, which is things which are high value but low complexity.
Okay. Yeah. I think.
Did I get the question proper?
Yeah, I think there were basically, yeah, absolutely. I think there were basically three items. Long-term value associated products, meaning we might not realize the ROI anytime soon. It's probably a very common problem in the product management world. And these products associated with low short-term returns, that's what I mentioned, but have a high deal of complexity. Basically, if you take any of the AI products or AI SaaS.
So now that I actually heard your question again, I think you've kind of bang on described the challenge I and my team grapple with, because ours is a product that kind of accrues value with time. There are network effects at play. While in the initial year, the complexity to deploy and to kind of utilize and become a power user is fairly high. But once you do that, the value kind of starts accruing with time. The key thing there is what we've at least tried to do there is, while that's the nature of the game that we are playing, right? That's what we've chosen to, that's the kind of product we've chosen to build. But at the same time, there would be features, because at the end of the day, our users and our buyers, they are still driven in their organizations by their monthly, quarterly, annual objectives and targets. So are there solutions that we can overlay on top of the core product, which can help reduce the net time to value? And so time to value, for example, became a very interesting vector that we started measuring internally to say, what is the time from the time I go live till the time I'm able to deliver the first impact measure to the customer. And that impact measure, again, the complexity comes in because that varies by customer use cases, us being a marketing product. So there are different things you can do that this is that.
Thank you. So I think there was a certain metrics-based query. I think it's kind of covered in that. And then we have, what impact does factors and assumptions make on our product roadmap with respect to prioritizations? So basically, there are assumptions and then there are dependencies. I think the query is, how do the assumptions, the dependencies, and the multiplicity of the factors, how do they make an impact on the product roadmap? Probably this will be the last query, what we can take for the day. Your take on it, Yogesh?
Yeah, so absolutely, as I said earlier, right, when you are trying to build product roadmap and looking for a vision, there are certain assumptions, dependencies that you need to factor in when building the product, right? For example, as I was showing the model from McKinsey as well. So, do you have enough adequate resources to actually build that, or are you going to acquire some of the product capability and skills later as you move along, right? So I think some of these are important aspect to consider when you are building. Some of the assumptions will not come true, right? You will get surprises. There will be bumps along the road. You need to take care of that, and that's where the plan needs to be flexible and adaptive with respect to what market is forcing, right? Because customers are very smart these days, especially when I'm looking at, say, cloud migration as a space, right? Customer wants to migrate and adopt to cloud much faster. Customer wants to migrate to sorry, I'm getting a recording.
Yeah, I guess we are
running out of time. Yeah. So so in summary, yes, that will be the key trigger point for how you want to move along. And again, coming back to the collaboration, communication, and customer, these three C's will bail you out during this, from assumptions and dependency perspective.
Thanks a lot, Yogesh. I think this was a very informative session from both of you, Yogesh and Vishal. I think most of us definitely gained a lot of means of and methods to how to prioritize, what are the methods and techniques used. So I think thank you all for having listened to the conversations, being a part of this nice small journey. So over to NASSCOM. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving this opportunity, NASSCOM and Praneeth. Thank you.
Rahul or Prashant? Okay, thank you guys. I guess that's it for the evening. Have a great day.